You are now watching Islam.
لله عبادا فطنا طلقوا الدنيا وخافوا الفتنا نظروا فيها فلما علموا أنها ليست لحي وطنا جعلوها لجة واتخذوا صالح الأعمال فيها سفنا
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. آمين يا رب العالمين. I start with this beautiful dua, which means Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'ana. O Allah, teach us what will benefit us. وَانْفَعْنَا بِمَا عَلَمْتَنَا, and give us benefit from what you've taught us. وَزِدْنَا عِلْمًا, and raise us in knowledge. Ameen. May Allah make us among those who are raised in knowledge and who benefit from the knowledge that they're learning. This video, it's not a good news video, but at the same time, I would inshallah try to put in a positive spin on it and show the confirmation of prophecy of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And I'll get straight to the chase. And some people might be shooken by this, and you know what? Don't be. You don't have to be. Why would you be when you know the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ already told us that this would happen? So again, it is not my intention to do anything other than that, but just to show. And if I'm wrong, may Allah forgive me, and I did not want to be one of the last ones to come. I wanted to comment on this because this is something that each and every one of us are faced with in our daily lives, and that is doubts, that is, sometimes being confused, seeking knowledge, seeking truth. But then, again, we have to remember something very important, and that is, again, knowledge. Knowledge is light. But truth is even more worthy of being called light. Now, let me explain that a bit. Knowledge, as we said, it can be beneficial or not beneficial. Someone can have knowledge of something, but it's a knowledge of evil. And someone can have knowledge of something as knowledge of good. So knowledge, depending on what it is and how it's used, can be both, beneficial or detrimental. What am I talking about here? Just to cut down to the chase, there's a brother by the name of Farhan Qureishi. It's been announced on many sites, and I think it's probably true, and we're still looking for confirmation. His site is still, this is a site, it's called DefendingIslam.com, that he has left Islam. He has committed apostasy. And this is his early site. This is called DefendingIslam.com, and basically, he had many debates with Dr. James White, with Sam Shamoon, with David Wood, and many other. If you look on YouTube, you'll see. Sorry, his name is Farhan Qureishi. I said probably Nabil Qureishi. I'm talking about the X, whatever, 19 apologetics, 17 apologetics. This is Farhan Qureishi. Supposedly, he was born Ahmadiyya, and then he converted to Sunnah Islam. And he's been involved, as we've seen, in many dawah activities, defending Islam. And he calls himself a Muslim psychologist. He says he vows to expose Islam and to expose its primitive nature as incompatible with contemporary reality. Now, people, you have to understand something. Before you get shaken by these things, before you start thinking, oh my God, this guy was like in the forefront of Islam, defending Islam, having all these things. Well, just take a break and let's analyze this, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran and as Muslims teaches us to think. Now, I'm not just going to try to put a Muslim spin on it. I'm going to try to put also a rational spin on this whole thing. First, let me give you the Muslim spin. Well, the Muslim spin is that the Prophet ﷺ told us 1400 years ago and plus that there'll be a time where people will be inviting people to Islam. People will be praying next to you in the masjid in Fajr prayer in the morning, the first line. invoking Allah, saying, oh Allah, please help me, please, oh Allah, I'm working for, being the best maybe even, will leave Islam faster than the arrow leaves the bow. In another hadith, Prophet said that people wake up as believers and they'll go to sleep as disbelievers, and they'll go to sleep as disbelievers and wake up as believers. Basically, apostasy and conversion to Islam will be in high rates. Now, again, don't be shaken by this. As subhanallah, it seems that we are so cult oriented these days as humans, or cliquey, that we try to follow people and that people give us strength when they, this guy beats this guy in this debate and that guy beats, this guy in this debate, this guy says something, we'll all shout Allahu Akbar, and the Christians shout Ameen, and the atheists, smack their head or something like that. This is not the way things work, brothers and sisters. This is not the way things work. As you can see, Farhan Qureishi, again, a long debater. 2010 is like his latest debate that took place. So that's like a year ago, maybe even less than a year ago. So, from the Muslim, again, the Prophet ﷺ told us that people will leave Islam. People will apostate. Apostasy will be so high. And we see it in today's time, with people attacking Islam from all over, from each side. He's not the only case. And we look at the Quranic view upon just following people to the point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if he were to die, were you going to turn back on your heels? This is the Prophet of Islam. This is the Prophet of the Islam being told by Allah, and actually the believers being addressed that if he dies, if he ceases to exist, and we can, kind of draw an analogy from that. If someone ceases to be part of us, ceases to be, someone we follow, are we going to turn back on our heels? Are we going to be shaken? Now, I'm going to come back to the rational exposition in a second, but I want you to just follow me here. And, I know I'm the master of, just kind of jumping all over places sometimes when I speak about a subject. Please try to follow me. Now, Farhan Qureishi has apostated from Islam. Again, let me restate it, that this is not something that should shake us, but it's something that we should confirm, actually, the prophecy of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and actually, I would say, scoring a point for the validity of Islam. Now, let's look at this a bit further. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Ankabut, do people believe that they will be called, that they will say we believe, and they will be left alone? No, verily they will be tested. They will be tested to make that Allah will make truthful who was lying and who was telling the truth. Who was lying and who was telling the truth. Now, do you think that Farhan Qureishi, and even I'm saying Nabil Qureishi because he's an ex-Muslim Ahmadiyya as well, and I think even Farhan Qureishi debated Nabil Qureishi. Do you think that because someone says I'm an ex-Muslim, or I was a Muslim and I studied and he had a debate with this guy and that guy, does that mean that all of a sudden his apostasy means something? Well, I'll tell you what it means. As Allah says in the Quran, it only means that this person was a liar. Now, people might be jumping like, how dare you call him a liar? Who are you to say? Blah, blah, blah. Well, let's just analyze it a bit further if you follow me right now. And I'm, as you see, usually in my speeches I'm very emotional and strong, but I'm trying to be very calm here to give you a rational perspective, not just an emotional, because people will come now and say, oh, you're just quoting Quranic verses and ayats, and man, why don't you do what he did, and well, for those who know me, he calls himself a Muslim psychologist. I'm also a student of psychology. I'm also a graduate of the School of Psychology and Science, with the degrees in both. So, I don't think that my double degree in biology and psychology puts me on a pedestal to call myself a Muslim psychologist and then to claim any kind of authority in Islam. So I'll admit here that I'm kind of trying to basically discredit Farhan Qureishi, and rightly so, because again, a lot of people might fall into the mistake of saying, oh my God, this guy, he used to debate people. He must have known so much about Christianity and Islam and this and that, and now he chooses to leave Islam. Well, let me give you a few pieces of news. I don't think he chose to become Christian. It doesn't seem from this, it seems that he chose to become either agnostic or just atheist. The second point is that, yes, I am judging him and I am discrediting him because he's worthy of discrediting. It comes too often that people get involved in interfaith dialogues and read books. I have a bunch of books in my library. Many, many, many books. Many, if I'm very honest, I've read, and many that I've not read. And people reading books and putting them behind them in libraries and making videos and quoting here and there, and it seems that they're seeking some kind of authority. However, brothers and sisters, and people and guests and viewers, knowledge is far deeper than reading books and making debates. And I would choose here to highlight a point that Islam stands out from other faiths, and that is the knowledge that passes in Islam. People can debate whether that is from God or not, but the knowledge that passes from Islam is knowledge of Islam first and foremost, and why Islam is the truth. And it comes down from a solid chain from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to us, and it will be passed on till the day of judgment, or till whenever time ceases to end on this earth, obviously, and the day of judgment will come after. And it will be passed on with a solid chain. Now, people might have issues, but again, it is the strongest historically, from a historical point of view, of narrations of what happened here and there, being recorded, being passed on. It is the strongest chain of knowledge that ever existed and will ever exist. Without a doubt, this is a fact. Now, what does it teach us, this knowledge of Islam? It teaches us about Islam. Not why Islam is wrong, or not why Christianity is wrong, not why Judaism or why atheism is necessarily wrong, even though it makes it does touch upon those things. It is why Islam is the truth. What is Islam and what are the sciences of Islam? And people, too many times, too often, they get up on the podium, speak as a representative of Islam, but have no knowledge, number one, of the Arabic language, number two, of the Quran, number three, of the Hadith, number four, of the sciences involved around Islam, number five, of the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon the seerah, number six, of authenticity of knowledge and of these narrations, number seven, and maybe one of the, I wouldn't say the most important, but a very, very important one, knowledge about life in general, as to what life is and what are double standards, for example, and what are the pains and sufferings, and at the same, on the opposite spectrum, what are the blessings of life. What is life? Because that's one thing that convinced me of Islam, and not necessarily at the beginning, but later on when I was faced with such problems. And I'll make here a confession that yes, I've had people attacking me from left and right, especially my early years of Islam, second, third year. Did I have doubts? Of course I did. I'll be lying if I would say I never had doubts about Islam. Did I have doubts? I had doubts about everything in life. And you know what? Many, I would say most, or those who really think about life and really think, have had doubts about almost everything in their life. And you know what? This is life. Now people are like, oh, having doubts? Yes, people have doubts. Have doubts before certainty comes to them. Because you have to understand, certainty and doubt cannot coexist. It is a contradiction. So in the heart of a person, certainty and doubt cannot coexist. Someone can be between certainty and doubt, at which point it seems that maybe Farhan was. And my advice to such people would be, You don't need to step on the platform and represent Islam. Seek knowledge. And I'm gonna get again to remember the first part in the beginning of this video. I said I'm gonna talk about first from the Islamic perspective and then from a outside Islam perspective. What people, and I'm not saying that that's the rational, but I'm just gonna call it the rational side, because people say, "Oh man, you're irrational, Islam, blah blah blah. You're just being biased from Islam." So I'm gonna call the outside perspective. Um, so you don't need to step on a pedestal and represent Islam. You don't need to make videos. You don't even need to go on this YouTube site. You need to seek knowledge. You need to learn of what Islam teaches as why Islam is correct. And then if you want to go on to see what people say about why Islam is wrong, well, at least you would have what Islam tells you is correct. So you would have some kind of a knowledge. You would be armed, as opposed to when you go on with empty hands and you go on and being thrown into, in the middle of a battle with no weapons. Islam gives you the weapons, and then you go and fight in the realm of knowledge. And if you lose, mashallah. So it seems that Farhan Qureishi, as he says, and I want to just, says here, that says, after years of having been involved in think tanks, advocacy groups, dawah, initiatives, and academic apologetics as a Muslim, I have decided to evolve my perspective of reality and existence as knowledge has reached me and renounce my faith in Islam. Okay. This was a thought-out decision that took months of prayer, consideration, evaluation, and knowledge-seeking on my part. Prayer to who and to what? Did God leave you? Did Allah leave you or lead you to leaving Islam? Or are you praying? So we need to know as to are you Christian, Jew, or you're just nothing. Knowledge-seeking on my part. So this is a little bit of contraction here from a Muslim psychologist. And again, I'm telling you very honestly that I'm trying to discredit him, and rightly so. Every bit it has been a search for meaning and truth has been a grieving process to me to realize that what I've been attached to all of these years, in fact, is not the ultimate reality behind our existence. Alright, we're going to get back to that, to the outside part. Nevertheless, it is simultaneous liberation and continued enlightenment that brings about serenity and peace of mind for me as well. Well, I want to make here a very statement. This is again to the Muslims. If peace of mind and serenity is why you worship God and why you're in Islam, then you should be going to meditate or something like that. I'm not saying that that's not part of Islam and that's not what you're going to reach at one point or here and there. But you have to understand that it seems that Farhan did not understand a simple aspects such as what qalb means, what the heart means, what the Quran says about the heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that qalb is what flips and it's over flipping. So will you always have peace of mind and serenity? Well, no. And that's why scholars say if you're worshipping Allah to feel good, then you're actually basically not worshipping Allah properly. Because the feel good is not what we're actually worshipping Allah for. The feel good is not. That's a byproduct. We're worshipping Allah because He is worthy of worship. And with that worship will come hardships, will come heartaches, will come, other than peace of mind and other than serenity at many times. And that is the reality of life, brothers and sisters. If you're worshipping Allah, sometimes you're going to be sad, you're going to cry, you're going to be depressed sometimes because of all the things that are going around you, all the trials and tribulations of this life. So I'm sorry Farhan, but if this is what is your ultimate destination, enlightenment and serenity and peace of mind, then you should have been a Buddhist from the beginning. My apostasy has not been based on dislike in Islam or its requirements. Rather, it was based on the realization that Islam is in direct contradiction with contemporary knowledge involving and including science, philosophy, ethics, anthropology, and the field which I am most interested in, educated in, and practice as my line of work, namely psychology. This is a very important statement here, and I hope I can just highlight it here for a second. Because it is very, very important. Now, why? Well, I can't get it here to zoom, but He's saying that it's not based on his disliking. Well, I'll bet you in 1 second that here, as it says later in thanking Ali Sina, I want to thank Ali Sina for giving me the platform to explore Islam and expose its primitive nature, incompatible primitive nature. So you're already not liking Islam. You just contradict yourself just 3 paragraphs down. Just to show you the shallowness of people who claim to represent Islam. They don't know Islam. They get up on the platform and start talking to people. Then they get confused. They leave Islam and they're like, well, I didn't really have a problem with Islam. Islam is nice. But I hate Islam. Islam sucks. It's horrible. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, why? And blah, blah, blah. So, really, if you're a student of psychology, Farhan, if you see this video, man, do I want it? Is there any benefit in me debating you, like showing that you're wrong, that you made a wrong decision? Let's debate about, does God exist? Let's debate about science, philosophy, ethics, anthropology. You want to debate about those things? Alright, if you want to, I'm ready for it. No problem. But is it going to benefit me anyhow? Or is it going to bring you back to Islam? No, because you already made your mind. But if you want to, no problem, we can debate these things. So, but I just want to show you here that what an interesting change. He's thinking Ali Sina. Ali Sina, and again, if you want to see how Ali Sina has been exposed for who he is and how, just from a rational point of view, who he is and how flawed he is in his thinking. And again, I want to bring in something from our daily life that everyone has experienced. And that is double standards. Because you have to understand, when you leave a certain train of thought and you go for another, you can't be sitting somewhere on a neutral edge. There's no such thing in life as a neutral edge. You adapt some kind of philosophy, some kind of way of life. And obviously Farhan has done that. Psychology, ethics, morals he's talking about, right? So I want to go back to this again and say, again, something from life, double standards. Farhan, I challenge you. For every aspect they're going to raise against Islam, which you will, even though you're saying that my apostasy has not been based on dislike in Islam, it is based on dislike in Islam because you've been confused and you didn't have proper knowledge of Islam. Now people might say again, they start barking and say, well, you read so many books, he debated so many people, how can you say he doesn't have knowledge of Islam? I'm saying he didn't have knowledge of Islam. Not knowledge of Christianity or other things that he debated. He didn't have knowledge of Islam. He might have knowledge of, how can I put it, your Western university type of Islam, but he didn't have knowledge of Islam, of proper. And again, people say, oh yeah, here we come again, starting again with a proper, I'm telling you very seldom, there's people who study Islam from a philosophical point of view, and they don't understand Islam from a traditional point of view. And here, tradition, I'm talking about tradition is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He is the source. This is where through who the message came through. This is who we look to. Now, people go into Western universities and learn Islam and learn, psychology, theology, and philosophy within Islam. They say, oh, it's Islamic philosophy. Really? Anyway, going back to this, Farhan, I challenge you and I'll show you for every argument that you will bring up, and you'll probably use many platforms. I will show you. I will firstly debunk it, and then I will show you that the same train of thought that you've adapted now is actually contradicting your stance, and it's a double standard. And it's basically why you left Islam is the same thing as why you went to a different direction. Philosophy, same thing. Ethics, even more. Anthropology, even more. And of course, psychology. It's your line of work. My friend, it means that you should submit your degree of psychology and put it down right here and say, I quit. Because if you've done psychology, it means that you haven't read your books properly to understand what psychology is. So if you've left Islam because it contradicts psychology, well, guess what? It does. many, many, many times. There are many times where it agrees with it, but Islam contradicts psychology over and over and over and over again. And it seems from here that because you're educated and practice as your line of work, psychology, not Islam, of course, again, bringing it back to the truth of what I'm trying to expose here, you've left Islam. So again, people, try to understand that. So basically, he was educated in psychology, line of work psychology. His default was psychology, but then Islam did not agree with it, so he tossed it out because he has to be in what he's been educated. My friend, if you know psychology and the study of human behavior, the study of human minds, you know that it's actually only based on theories. Say so, this person says so. Contradictory theories, contradictory theorems, contradictory, sometimes even research. And people arguing and trying to fill in the vacuum of human misery as to what life really is. And just feeling the pain of inconsistency, insecurity, and unanswered questions. In the end, a psychologist will always end up his theory or his train of thought, leaving people more confused than they started with. Even though people are trying to use psychology as a platform of explaining life, for those who have studied psychology, those who have studied the big names in psychology, such as Freud and others, they realize there are some of the most perverted people and the most confused people that life has ever known. And then we try to base our line of work and our lives based on this. Now again, I remember one day I made a lecture about this, and someone called me upon it and says, I'm a psychologist, PhD, he was practicing Muslims, like, why are you putting down psychology? I'm not putting down psychology, I'm putting it in its place. Again, I am a student of psychology, a graduate of psychology. I'm not saying that psychologists just toss it out. I'm just putting it in its place. For those who have studied, it has its purpose. It does contradict Islam, and Islam contradicts it. And that is it. I'll leave it at that. You do whatever you want with it. You can, come to me and argue with me about psychology, about whatever. But that's what I'm saying. And for those who have read and studied and understand, they'll realize that the vacuum that is not filled by anything other than faith in God will not be filled by psychology or anything like that. For Farhan Qureishi, you're basically walking into a field of sadness and just following your own mind and just changing your mind as time goes and not having a true path of knowing what is right and what is wrong. But you're always going to change your mind according to what your brain tells you and what you will think is correct. And you know what? You'll never solve the problems of the world. If that's one of your, if that's one of your goals to solve the problem, and if that is one of your goals to solve the problems of the world, you will not. And for a very simple reason. You will always disagree with the next person next to you, with the person next to you, because you are going to use a standard, a stick, a measuring stick, which will be ever changing based on how times change, human needs change, and so on and so forth. And the concept which you call here ethics can be right away thrown out. Philosophy, yes, it'll definitely stand, because philosophy, that's exactly what it is. Science will always be ever changing, contradictory, revised, first edition, second edition, 10th, 100th edition. People 50 years from now will be making fun of us living in 2011, of our satellites, our cell phones, our computers, our scientific theories. They'll laugh at us and mock us and how backwards and primitive we were. And yet we laughed and said that the Quran does not contain science, or is basically in contradiction with science when its scientific facts are facts, not theories. And again, I challenge you, we can fight over that another time. Ethics will ever be changing. Anthropology, I mean, That's basically, you don't really need to comment on that. And psychology, again, going back to what I said before, it's going to leave you exactly with this, with your hands open and be like, what? Now, he says, in the coming months, I plan to contribute to the Faith Freedom International, right, which is Ali Sina's website, to explore, he says, the behavior and psyche of the different types of Muslim others. So he's going to be the shrink of the Muslims right now, the Western Muslim, the mystic Sufis, the purists, Salafis, politically different, Hizb, Tahrir wa Ikhwan, and among the many causes of the Ummah, each having its own set of advocates with unique behaviors and mentality. It seems that you've not read, but again, he's going to be the shrink of the Ummah, and he doesn't want to. He's not disliking Islam, but of course, his disliking for Islam will come about and will, basically snowball. And he'll basically spend time. He says, "I've spent time and energy studying and experiencing the different denominations and subcultures with him." Is that a problem? Well, it seems again that you did not read the prophecy. I'm sure you probably read it, but you did not understand the prophecy. The Prophet Muhammad said, saying how people divide. How people divide to the last point, to the smallest thing. And this is what we're living in today. That confirmation of the prophecy by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that you will divide in 73 sects. People will divide. The Quran says, everyone rejoicing in their hizb, in what they division. Shiism, all over. That's what the Quran says. But it seems again that we read the Quran only to debate Christians and what the what verses from the Bible and this and that to debate each other. So basically saying again, putting himself on a pedestal, that he has experienced their spirituality and religiosity firsthand, having studied with their scholars and preachers, really, and having read their books. I know he read the book, arguments, articles for them. I believe that I have grasp of wherever they stand in psychology, and I plan to explore this more in depth in the near future as I publish articles. This is what I'm going to move and transition. But again, I really want to just to analyze, because from the writing of a person, it gives you, as from a psychological point of view here, I'm going to use psychology here on you, but it basically, and again, you don't say I'm picking and choosing, I said psychology is in its place. Basically, the writing of a person exposes his ideas, his true colors, his psyche even. So as we've seen already, a contradiction, we've seen already the even a prediction of what's going to happen here. It's not a dislike in Islam, but we will dislike it, you'll see. And he will write very bad things about it. And he will not be from a neutral point of view, but he will be, of course, on a biased point of view, because everyone's biased in the end of the day. I am biased, you're biased, everyone is biased. If you don't admit that, you're lying to yourself. So, basically, he's going to be the shrink of the Ummah. He looks at the many colors. I've said that it's the many colors of the Ummah are something that's been prophesized, again scoring a point for the validity of Islam. But it seems that Farhan doesn't understand that. Now again, he's trying to give himself credibility, but I'm debunking that. I'm taking his credibility away. Because saying that I've spent energy studying, experiencing different denominations, subcultures of the Ummah, basically knowing and studying with the scholars, he's saying, my friend, there's been people who lived with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who wrote the Quran for him, who apostated. You think because you've read some books and you've known the different colors of the Ummah, you're going to be an authority on Islam? Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, people will leave the deen. They will leave that, their hearts will be flipping within very short periods of time. They'll be the ones foremost preaching to people, setting on the pedestals, inviting people to the right path. They'll be the ones in the hellfire, and people will be asking, aren't you the one who used to tell us this and this and this? Like, yeah man, but myself, I wasn't doing that. Aren't you the one who used to forbid us from, or guide us here and here and here? I mean, look at that. Look at how beautifully this example fits in with what the Prophet Muhammad said. And then he goes on to saying that I realized that 1400 years worth of consistent Islamia theology is not what I believed was the ultimate. Rather, I realized it was a primitive attempt to understand and implement social, spiritual, religious, and ethical standards. Really? Really? Well, honestly, to be honest with you, I don't know if I have to comment here, because it really shows your ignorance of anthropology, your ignorance of Islamic theology, and your ignorance of how anthropology fits within Islamic theology. Number one, Islamic theology never changed. God was always been one. I mean, it changed for other people, and people have distorted it, but God is always one. That's why we always say that the prophets brought the same message. Now, if you're a student of anthropology and psychology, you would have realized that as civilization advanced and different social standards came to be, what God has revealed in stages was the Sharia. And He says that in the Quran, that to each we've given the rituals and their laws. Why? Because Islam encompasses the ever-changing dynamics, the dynamics of societies, the dynamics of human beings, the new advances in science and so on, and the new issues that they will be faced with. And the Sharia allows for that. And that's why the Sharia has been revealed in stages. And that's why certain people before were allowed to do some things and they're not allowed to do now, or they're not allowed to do it before and they're allowed to do it now. And we're not talking about those clear-cut things that are ethical. We're talking about things that are considered, available or allowed in this case or that case, or this issue or that issue. We're not talking about killing this person, or the main universal concept of ethics: stealing, killing, oppression, this and that, okay, abuse, and so on and so forth. We're talking about different things that progress with time. Now, people, such as, not drinking alcohol. I mean, I can give examples. That's not, the issue of how you do this transaction in the realm of business, or, interest, or this or that, or so on and so forth. Now, the important point here is that I want to highlight again is that Farhan does not understand anthropology. And not just that, doesn't understand that Islam covers anthropology from such a perfect standpoint of view, keeping the purity of the message coming from God, but at the same time looking at the concept that humans, in their mentality, in their dynamics, their society, are evolving. And Islam is the only way of life that allows for that. The only one. And when we see that that's the norm, we see in the abnormal parts of other religions that people had to abandon their religion or put them onto a Sunday, schedule, because it was not in touch, in line with the life that they're living now. That 10 years ago used to be this, but now it's like that. Islam is the only one that has allowed for that change and staying within the boundaries of the Sharia. And this is something that is very important for people to understand and take in consideration. Now, I want to go back and now go from that outside point of view and analyze, just from the same article, as I said. Let's use psychology and Farhan, because he's a psychologist. And again, this whole article is basically written to put himself now in an authoritative position, or as an authority on Islam, that when he will write articles, people look at him like, weren't you the guy who debated all these Christians and and defended Islam and so on and so forth, and now, you must know what you're talking about. With all honesty and respect, you have no clue what you're talking about. Now again, you have knowledge of things, but you don't have beneficial knowledge. You don't have knowledge that is put in the right place. You have things knowledge. Basically, you read things and you memorize things, and it's there, but you don't know where to put them, and you're confused. And I'm sure I can predict what happened. You start getting involved with different people, and where did the people get you? They got you and showing, oh, look at this jihadist, what he did. Oh, look at what Prophet Muhammad said there. Here, oh, look what this hadith says here. Oh, look at the 72 verses. Oh, look at this. How can you believe in this? How can you believe? Look at, we live in, look at this, look at this backwardness and this primitive, how can, look at what the Iranians are doing. Look at, what's happening in Iran and Pakistan and this and this and this. Aren't we, so advanced? And again, if you study psychology, Farhan, you know that humans are a product of their society. And it is too many times that I tell Muslims, and I myself, as a Westerner, I put myself in the same thing. And I can say that not too many people will be able to pull themselves out from that. Am I a product of my society? Yes, I am. Was I able to overcome that? I believe I was. I believe that it's kind of like waking up from the, like in the Matrix, where you start seeing the inconsistencies of sight. And I'll tell you how I've realized to come, because I said from the beginning, I was exposed to these sides. I was exposed to Ali Sina. I was exposed to Answering Islam and many other people who've came up with these things to me. But there was and I think it's by God's blessings and grace again, of course, but there was one fundamental difference. The things that happened in my life previous to me embracing Islam and the school of life that I've been through made me understand what life other than Islam was in its integrity, with its ethics and morals, with its psychology and anthropology, with its societal dynamics and so on and so forth. I realized what it was. And when I entered Islam and people try to point things into Islam, I only said to them, you don't understand real life, do you? You're basically sitting on a chair that is broken and try to preach to me about fixing my chair. So again, try to understand that in the right context. I'm not saying that Islam has anything wrong. I'm just saying that people are using wrong standards to judge Islam and putting themselves in a position of blemish, being, basically, in a good stance and saying, ah, man, look what you're doing. Come with us. We have the right path. And basically appealing to emotion, appealing to ridicule, and that's how most I can bet anything. It's a one-way bet. Not, don't take me literally here. But I can really bet you that Farhan was, where did they catch him? They caught him on the emotional appeals, the appeals to ridicule. Look at this hadith. It's telling that people should drink, like camel beef, for example. Right? And again, I'm not trying to go here in hadith or anything like that. But just to give you a small example, how people have, and I've seen people being, misguided and confused by, oh man, camel pee? Camel urine? The Prophet told people to drink camel urine? Yes. Now, people are like, oh my God, what should I do? Oh my God, people camel urine, right? Well, people don't understand that, number one, don't understand the anatomy of a camel and what is camel urine. They right away, their shallowness, the shallow mind, the shallow experiences in life, their shallow knowledge will lead them to right away equate it to human urine. And because they urinate in their bathrooms, they see it all the time, and they're like, oh man, that's nasty. How can the Prophet of Islam say that? But the same people who are making fun of that have no problem of eating mold. Yes, you've seen mold. It grows on your bread when you leave it out too long. It's nasty and sticky and you can get sick from it. and maybe even die. Sometimes get food poisoning and die. But people don't understand that mold is also medicine if understood how it's used and what the real purpose of it. But mold was from where some of the first antibiotics, such as penicillin, were extracted from. So can I go and say you guys are eating mold? You use mold to take medicine from it? Right? Can I do that emotional appeal, that attempt to ridicule, which is just another debate tactic? No, I cannot do that. Because that's just shallow thinking, shallow minds. If people would know and understand this, the biology, the anatomy of a camel, and look at the effects and the narrations which say that people were healed and so on and so forth, then you have nothing. You don't have a leg to stand on. So let me come out from the side again. I'm sorry that I'm prolonging this for too long, almost an hour. But let me give you the perspective from the outside. Now, I have a question for Farhan. How can you say that you've left Islam and all of a sudden you're going to start writing articles? And 2010 was like your last debate, if I'm not wrong. And all of a sudden you're going to write articles against Islam, exposing Islam and showing that it's primitive and incompatible with contemporary reality, and unless and until Muslims choose to reform it, reform Islam. So again, I want to ask you, if someone is in a search of knowledge, search of truth, and not a search of being recognized and being put on a pedestal, and with all due respect, you've lost a lot of your debates because, just like many people, you're not a good debater. Now, that might have caused some things inside of you and stir you up and cause more doubts, but nonetheless, it doesn't take anything away from Islam. It takes only away from you. And I looked at your debate with Sam Shimon just a little, how you're sitting there confused, and Sam pretty much, really handled you. But again, I'm just trying to discredit here, very rightly so, and I'm being very honest about it. But you're going again that brainwashing their adherents with. So basically, you were brainwashed. Basically, you were, had issues that you didn't, basically. So you're sitting there in front of people preaching Islam, but you were brainwashed. You were a brainwashed person at the time. But how can we believe that? How do we know that now you're brainwashed? I mean, what's this measuring stick? Because you see, it's such a fast transition. Within a year, you tell me that you switched. You're sitting there preaching to people about Islam, how they're wrong about their ethics and morals and this and that. Islam is the truth. To show Christianity is wrong and this and that. On a different number of topics. And all of a sudden, you're going to start writing for Freedom Faith International. I mean, anyone with an ounce of intellect will realize the problem with that. People who leave a way of life that they adhered to for many years, that have studied supposedly, and the scholars have defended, have traveled for, and spent so much time, and then within a few months or a year, they're ready to go against it and on everything that they've written and have fought for and so on and so forth. That just shows a shallowness in not just the way of doing it, but in the not just in the approach of how it's been handled, but also in the knowledge that this person possessed. Because for you to be able to flip in moments and being able to to go and start writing against Islam, from claiming to have such deep knowledge of Islam and being so convinced about Islam, it is itself a problematic change. I leave the people with brains to think about that for a second. And to think about Farhan's intentions, that he's seeking now another, a platform to maybe just gain his recognition. to just push forward his ideology, psychology about life that he had before, that he used Islam. So basically for you, Islam was a platform. It was not the other way around. The psychology would have been a platform for you to introduce Islam, but you used actually psychology was your default, and Islam was just a platform to basically put forth your psychological understanding of the reality of lives, and so on and so forth. So keep thanking Al Sina because it's interesting. What else do I want to say about this? Just these things to think about it. And of course, the other thing that I want to say and just highlight here is, one second, right here, that basically realizing that he's got a problem. Perhaps the most important realization I've come to. Wow, now people look to this. Perhaps the most important realization I've come to is that I would receive the death penalty under Sharia law for simply coming to these conclusions or realizations. This disturbs me. Of course, then you need to apply some psychology to yourself to the core, and demonstrates how the Ummah uses fear tactics under its Sharia system in order to preserve and strengthen the theological and political agenda. I am willing to debate you on this topic if you would like to, and show how wrong you are. If this is your most important realization that you've come to know, it shows that basically you left Islam not because of knowledge that came to you, but because of doubts, because of confusion, and because of shallow understanding of what life is. Now, putting aside religion, my friend, if you have a problem with the Sharia input or the Sharia view on apostasy, then you will have a problem with every other aspect of life they will try to follow. Why? Well, because anytime any of these aspects of life that you not like, and I guarantee you there'll come so many things in your life, what will you do? You'll just apostatize again your train of thought, or your psychology, or your philosophical school of thought, or whatever you're going to choose. You're going to apostatize it again, and you're just going to go move to another point. But your disturbance comes from the issue here of death, basically saying that you'll be put to death. Okay? So now my question to you, that's only an issue that you have and other people have, and that is an issue of you not agreeing with it. How does that? Can you imagine someone who claims throughout these paragraphs that he has so much knowledge of Islam, so much knowledge of theology, of different groups, and then says, but perhaps the most important realization I've come to is that I would receive the death penalty under Sharia law for simply coming to these conclusions or realizations. So basically, what I understand from this, and what this exposes, it's not really that you've left Islam because, again, of knowledge, but you left Islam because you had some issues that you yourself did not agree to. Now, from a rational point of view, if someone disagrees with something because of their own thinking, doesn't make that something wrong or worth leaving. Pay attention. If someone disagrees with something from their own understanding of reasoning, doesn't make that thing wrong, and at the same time worth leaving because of this realization. Perhaps the most important realization that I've made, brothers and sisters, as a student of life first, then later on a Muslim, then student of psychology, science, I realized that Islam has the only input in life, the only true view and true understanding of the realities of life. And it would give you the realities of life with its sweet and its sour together. Because when you get too much sweet, a little bit of, and you put a little bit of salt on your tongue, it's going to totally disturb you. It'll be something so strange. But when you've tasted both sweet and salt, then you know them both, and you know where to put them each in place. I'll give you one example, and I'll try to close with this. Brothers and sisters, do not be shaken by this or by anyone's apostasy. And a'udhu billah, I seek refuge in Allah Ta'ala. And I ask Allah to take me, to forgive me first and foremost for my sins, for all my sins, because I am not, who I should be. And we are all lacking, every human being, and we asking Him to raise us and purify us. But I seek refuge in ever leaving Islam, and I ask Allah to take me on Iman. But if anyone ever, if I do, maybe Shabir Ali or Dr. Zakir Naik, or can you imagine people that people follow and millions of people look up to, if they ever leave Islam, I give you again the advice of the Quran. Will you turn on your heels? If any of these people die or leave Islam or so on, will you abandon the truth of Islam because of some people? Will you be shaken because of some people? I leave you with that question. Because Islam is in it of itself the truth, and not the truth because of the people who are speaking for it, including myself. I'll leave you with one example to drive the point home of this whole ethics, morals, and so on and so forth. And how does Islam look on these things? Farhan has a problem with death penalty under Sharia law. Farhan, do you have a problem with war, for example? Now people will say, what are you talking about, war? Well, I'll tell you something. In Islam, there is war. People are trying to always play it down that Islam is just a religion of peace. Islam is a religion with the goal of peace. Now, don't try to misquote me here, because this totally agrees with the NATO points about war and peace, with the all other organizations, global organizations, peace organizations such as the Peace Corps and so on and so forth, the blue hats and many other things, and basically that is that war is part of life. Peace is sometimes upheld by war. War will happen, people will die, there will be politics, things will happen, life will come to begin, life will end, and so on and so forth. But this is life. Now these are people who don't even claim a religion sometimes, acknowledging it as something that has to be done. Right? For example, death penalty, many of the United States, some of the United States is still on. Because would you call these people not integral or lacking integrity? People can argue from both sides, but the matter of fact is that people have voted for this. People realize that these things have their place. And people such as Farhan look from outside and say, oh, this is wrong, and this is wrong. I don't believe this and this and this and this and this. And other people will disagree with them and they'll argue Islam. But Islam tells us one thing, brothers and sisters. Let me drive it home again. You submit. Yes, there's war, and yes, there's penalties. Yes, there's Sharia, and yes, there is this. Yes, there's love, and yes, there's dislike. Yes, there is killing, and yes, there is preserving life. Yes and no and yes. And this is life. And that's what Islam is, what? A deen of fitrah, the deen of the human life, of human disposition, that puts everything in their right perspective. Now the problem comes when someone abuses and takes these perspectives, these things from the right places and puts them somewhere else. This is where our ummah is facing problems. This is where the so-called extremists and so on and so forth are causing problems. This is from where sites and people such as Farhan spur and come and say, I have a problem with this. But Islam teaches us something. Put the right thing in the right place at the right time and understand life as a whole within the spectrum of Islam, and don't separate Islam from your life. Understand ethics and morals and universal concepts of integrity and morals in their proper place. And yes, sometimes those things will stay in their place, and the concept of preserving life will actually be put on the side for a second. Not even on the side, but will be left in its place. And then war starts, for example. And people are killed, and people survive. And people are taken hostages, and people are freed. And that's where Islam teaches the proper concept of understanding these things and submitting and not putting our brain over the brain of God. And again, of course I'm biased here, but let's remove that and just look from the outside point of view. And anyone who has understood life for what it is will realize and come to a conclusion to say that all these things have a purpose in life, and all these things have their place in life. And all those who try to use emotional appeals and attempts to ridicule and say, oh my God, this is so unethical, they have no clue about life and what ethics means. People have problems with punishments, then talk to those people who had their kids raped, chopped in pieces, molested. Go to Africa and see what happens to the sex slave trade. And talk to those parents who had their little daughter, Maryam and Aisha and Jane and so on, being taken away from them, and the criminals are laughing at them on the street, and the government can do nothing. And even when they do, they just get locked up in jail. And that little daughter has been chopped up in pieces and abused before that by dirty scumbags coming sometimes from the West who are claiming ethics and morals and paying that expensive fare just to molest and rape little girls. Talk to the parents of these girls and see if justice was served, and see and ask them, don't you think that this punishment, for example, which comes from the Sharia, would have its place right now? And they would say, please, I hope that one day, inshallah, this will come back and people get these punishments because that is what they deserve. And you have human rights groups screaming, oh, even criminals deserve to just live, to lock them. Really? Who are you to decide? Has your daughter been raped and chopped into pieces? Has your son been killed or abducted? You are no one to say that. And that's why when people such as Farhan come from this point of view, from this angle of attacking Islam, such as the death penalty and the Sharia law, they really are very, very selfish, and they're only thinking about themselves. And they're only thinking about what? Let me quote him again. About his liberation, continued enlightenment, and serenity of mind for me as well. So they're really thinking about themselves, to be in line with all those other people who think themselves as free. This is Jibril K. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us to the truth, forgive us, and give us this clear aql. Everyone has a brain, but not everyone has an aql. Okay? And there's a big difference between the two. Because the aql will tie you and guide you to where you have to go to understand things in the right perspectives, while your brain can be just a piece of meat that can do many calculations, you can have PhDs, you can have many things, masters, degrees in psychologies, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, you will not realize what reality of life is. At the end of the day, go back home and worship monkeys after solving, to nth degree exponential problems, mathematical problems, and leading rocket science programs, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, you have no aql. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All I can say is the same thing you say for when a person dies, because Farhan has died a spiritual death. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.